Dram watched as Masters left his office, keeping an eye on his security monitors until the player's avatar had finally left the building. The troublemaker was always bringing new problems to his doorstep, demanding that he provide information at lower than normal rates. Realistically, he really should have said no. But Masters also brought quite a bit of business his way. And anyways, it was good to have an in with someone who was as blunt as the claws that he used. Of course, he had to admit the fact that someone was making a move against Masters meant that things were going to get bloody. The man seemed to think that he was a political player, a smooth operator of some sort. In reality, the only reason no one had ever taken him out was because Masters was really just that good at getting things done, whether it was taking out troublesome players or managing new vampires as they arrived. Add on to that his first mover advantage, and really trying to deal with Jonathan Masters was just too much trouble for what it was worth for most people. He knew things were going to get heated, especially now that Masters was intent on taking action. More importantly, whatever he chose to do, it would have ramifications on the individuals, not just in this city, but other locations as well. Whatever was going on, it likely had something to do with the latest release. Every time an update happened, well, things changed. Reputations and digital fortunes were lost and made each update, with the livelihood and career of professional players always in jeopardy at those times. It'd be worrisome if the developers did a gun gala and gated certain weapons via monthly subscription fees. That one move had killed a third of their player base, made professional players who resold their weapons persona non grata, and left the shooter gaming community reeling for 2 years. Eternal Night, for all its flaws, was relatively stable. It had a dedicated fan base as mid-tier game. Of course, like any middling company, they had designs on growing bigger, which meant drastic changes could and would happen. And Dram really was not looking forward to actually finding a real job, especially since he had almost no useful real-world skills or contacts. All that meant he had a lot of work to get done now, as among other things, everyone would start coming to him for more information. That probably also explained why he bothered to keep in contact with Masters. Like a canary in the coal mine, the vampire had a tendency to catch whiff of new problems faster than anyone else. And since Dram was his preferred supplier, it meant he caught wind of things before anyone else. All of which left him and his various competitors with a lot more work. He glanced down at his keyboard for a second, and then looked up to his computer monitors, pulling up his contacts and sending out this tidbit of information to everyone. More importantly, he started the process of dragging them online. Emergency meetings were always hard to organize, especially since nearly half of the players were still out. One of the reasons most people chose to play an information broker was because it required so little actual time in the game itself. Set up the right connections, buy the right secondary programs and contacts, make sure you reviewed your offline parameters for the avatar, and all that information would flow in with minimal problems. The longer you stayed out, of course, the more information the game would dump into you, which was why most regular players would ensure they logged in at least once a day, even if for nothing other than some basic maintenance. Once you did that and reviewed the data, you could hang out with your friends and just play Power Broker. It also meant that they were one of the strongest organizations within the game. After all, if everyone was only part-time, there weren't a lot of egos to deal with. This was played for fun, not for money. And while there were egomaniacs, the nature of being a power broker meant that contacts were important, and anyone who pissed off enough players eventually found themselves frozen out. Not that that impacted Dram very much. After all, he was a full-time player. Had to be, what with his issues in the real world. Better to be here, considered ugly and unwanted, than out there and be considered, well, ugly and unwanted. For a second, Dram's leg jittered. Nervous, rocking energy transferred to a stupid neural tic. He froze as he realized what he was doing and shook his head. No. Here he was Dram. Unwanted, perhaps, ugly certainly, but ugly only in a game sense. More than one assignation had been completed and finished because, well, VR ugly was not the same as real-world ugly. Or something. He had no idea about how people thought, men or women. His leg stopped moving. He forced himself to breathe and relax. In any case, he was Dram here, and he had power, respect, money, and most of all, contacts.